Alright, welcome. Today we're going to be taking apart a Dell G5 5587 gaming laptop. This has the i5 8300H with the GTX 1060. So the first thing we want to do is to flip it over. This laptop's a little bit thrashed. There's a couple pieces missing from the case. And it looks like it's been opened up quite a few times. So let's see what we can find. So just undo that screw and you should be able to just kind of lift it up and pop it off. That's pretty nice. You have easy access to your Wi-Fi card, SSD, your hard drive if you have one, battery, RAM. So they make the usual stuff really easy to get to, which is always a plus for a laptop. Looks like the fan and heatsink assembly is going to be quite a bit more difficult, but we're pretty much going to take apart the whole laptop. Alright, so for the Wi-Fi, we're just going to go ahead and pop the antennas up and off. And we can kind of thread them out of the little channels. With the Wi-Fi card, we can just pull it out. Alright. So the SSD looks like it's just a another Philips 2.5 I'm using. So looks like most of these screws you can get with just a normal size Philips. I believe the exact size I'm using is a 2.5. Okay, so we'll remove that, set it aside. That's equipped. This one's equipped with a SATA M2. The slot looks like an NVMe, so it might be a hybrid slot. Okay, and for our RAM, if we can get your fingers in there, you just spread those little bars and the RAM should pop up and out of the slot. Alright, while we're right here, just so I don't forget, we're gonna kind of pop the adhesive up off of the pram battery, because that's going to be lifted out with the motherboard and we don't want it sticking. So generally they say you're supposed to remove or disconnect the battery before you do any of the part stuff, but this is so well protected by like this plastic inner cage. It looks like it's a lot harder to disconnect the battery and remove it than it is to do any of the RAM or hard drive or anything like that. So I think you'll be okay. Just wear a wrist strap or ground yourself before you crack open your laptop and you should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove the battery screws, and we can remove the battery. Not sure if that's it. I think it is. And it looks like the connector for the battery, if you have fingernails, you can kind of wiggle that most of the way out. And it looks like there's some battery. Okay, I'm gonna just pulling up on the keyboard ribbon when I'm trying to pull the battery up, so these might be glued. I'm trying to get a better look in there. Not sure what that's about, but maybe that's spill damage. could have been. But the battery is trying to pull up on that keyboard ribbon, which, I don't know, that might not be everybody's laptop. It might be just this one with some kind of sticky. But it's something to be aware of if you're pulling your battery up. Okay, so it looks like we have a smaller Phillips screw holding down that bracket. And I'm going to grab a 1.5. So yeah, you'll need a slightly smaller Phillips to get this little bracket off for the display cable, it looks like. And this one didn't come equipped with a hard drive, but there should be a caddy in here. I see the person left the screws there. So if there's a caddy, you know, of course 4 screws to remove that, and the SATA connector is just a simple flip up type retainer. Alright, for the display cable, they should have a little handy tab here you can kind of pull up on, and I like to just push down on the motherboard in case it's kind of hard to get up. This one wasn't too bad, but some of these display cables of this type of configuration, you have to pull up really hard to get them to pop off. Okay. So I think next we will, we need to remove the kind of the subframe. Either, I think that's what the motherboard is actually attached to. I don't know, we do need to remove these 4 screws holding on the rear vent cover. And then probably, yeah, we're just gonna have to remove all of these black screws that are holding the case and palm rest together. So the trick with these is once you gotta hold the tension kind of with your hand and just go through and raise up these tabs a little bit. And then once you get like 2 of them, maybe 3, you should be able to pull that vent cover off. Like so. Okay, and then I definitely want to free any more cables that are coming through this little plastic frame, and this connector just pops up and off, but it's kind of recessed down in there, so you'll have to get a spudger and just try to get those tabs when you're pulling up on it. Okay, so we freed the cables coming out of the display assembly, and looks like now we'll just have to go through and remove all these screws, and then once we get that little plastic frame out, then we should be able to get to the hinges and the motherboard. Alright, once you've checked and double checked to make sure you've got all the screws out, I also took out the ones that say fan. that are the smaller tip. Okay, so let's go ahead and just flip these up and remove the ribbons. So it looks more like the motherboard is attached to the bottom piece, so it looks like we probably removed the palm rest from the assembly. That'll be for the DC jack. I'm not sure if that connector has to come out. I guess we'll find out. They don't really give you a whole lot to grip on that thing. I hate those. Okay, so we can go ahead and carefully flip it over. And we're gonna get the seam in between the palm rest and the bottom case. Looks like it's kind of been, I can get a kind of a head start here where this big gap is. But the general idea is just hold a little bit of pressure on it and go along the sides and just pop that palm rest up. I can get a better look now. What is attached to what? Okay. So it looks like once we disconnected those ribbons, so the palm rest and screen are coming out together, and there's nothing holding that. Okay. So I'm going to put the screen and palm rest assembly aside for now. Go ahead and gently close that. Ooh, this is kind of a dust ball. This particular computer was sold to us with bad video. It's got a bad GPU. You should clean out these vents regularly with some canned air just to blow out the dust. It collects right where these fins go into the heatsink. So, I mean, as you can see, the heatsink fins are really thin, and it looks the same on the inside. So all that dust kind of collects right here. You can't see it from either side, but it's in there, and it will kill a motherboard. Okay, so we're gonna finish just unplugging the things that the motherboard still has plugged into it. Looks like the fans, and we'll go ahead and remove the screws for that DC jack. Alright, and then I'll finish removing the motherboard screws. And I see a couple screws on the top side of the fans too. I'm just going to go ahead and remove those since we'll be removing the fans anyways. Tempted to pull up this cover because there's probably some screws underneath it. Okay, on closer inspection, trying to start the motherboard free. Flip it over and you can notice the connector for the DC jack actually passes through a plastic tab right here. So I'm just going to pull up on that little bit of cable right there, and just so we can get a grip on it. There's no tabs on either side, so I'm just going to pull on the wires. DC jacks are the only things that you can sometimes pull on those, and they'll be okay just because they're a thicker wire. But that one definitely doesn't have anything to put the spudger into, so sometimes you just got to go for it. Okay, and then the CMOS, just make sure it comes through the hole there so it doesn't I guess the fans are a little bit loose too, so you saw that one flip over, just watch out for that. So I'll just move this out of the way and we'll finish taking those fans off of the motherboard. Looks like they're just kind of glued there with the tape on the other side. So actually, if you're just going to clean it out, or you just need to replace an individual fan, that's what those tiny fan screws were on the other side. So I'll probably end up putting those back in and keep this fan as an assembly. Okay, so the motherboard, or the heatsink screws on the motherboard, have numbers stamped into them. It doesn't matter which order you take these off. Just if you're tightening it back down with new thermal paste, you want to do it in the order of the numbers that are stamped on there, just so it tightens down the thermal paste properly. I don't really have to press down that hard on that screw, so I think I can just let it lay on the table. If you have, sometimes these heatsink screws are really tight and you have to really push down. Support the motherboard with your hand. So if you don't, you might hear a couple little cracking sounds, and that's never a good sound to hear on a motherboard. Alright, and then I see some thermal pads, and there's probably quite a bit of thermal paste, so once you've made sure you got all the screws, I don't see any more. If you can just get kind of a finger in between the heatsink and the motherboard and just kind of roll your fingers in there, it should help pop that up. Fan. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this back over, and then I guess we can flip that one that was kind of flipped up already, just to check to see how much dust is in there. I think most of it kind of came out, but so hair and stuff it just blocks those really thin fins. But if you use some canned air and just blast it straight in there, it'll kind of puff that stuff out and make it nice and clean. So as you can see, lots of thermal pads and some thermal paste, and looks like about 1 millimeter thickness. Okay, so that's it for the motherboard, and we will move on to the screen and palm rest. Alright, screen looks to be pretty easy, and we also have the power button here. I'm going to remove the power button, but the touchpad and keyboard I'm going to leave in place. And this one actually has a replaceable keyboard, as the back cover, or the back bracket for the keyboard is actually held on by screws. A lot of these computers, it's held on by just melted plastic, and it makes it a real pain to try to replace your keyboard. So we'll pull up on the little tape strips and finish removing that power button. So the touchpad looks pretty easy, just looks like 4 Phillips screws here on the top, and keyboard looks like a ton of Phillips screws. So we're going to finish separating the display assembly, so I'll go ahead and remove the remaining screw. On each side, and then these look like they're okay to swivel in place, so we'll just pull those up, unstick the tape, and then we should be able to separate the palm rest from the screen. So 4 screws, a lot of screws, and looks like the assembly is just the keyboard and the touchpad. It's nice and simple. Alright, so for the screen assembly, this thing's really dirty. This one looks to be pretty easy, so I'm just going to get my fingernail on the inside of that bezel, and without putting too much pressure on the screen, you're just going to roll your fingers in there and pop that bezel up. Might help to use the spudger, but these seem to survive taking off if you pull up from the inside usually. And some you gotta kind of like push downwards. It depends on what kind of catches they use on these things. So I'll just work slowly at it. And eventually start popping all the way off. And this one already looks like it's got a gap here on the bottom where the hinges are, but it probably won't come all the way off until you have a little gap there. Alright, so we'll finish popping that off, and then we'll have easy access to the inside. So generally, it looks like on this model you can actually replace the screen without having to do any of this other stuff. So it looks to me like you should be able to pop that bezel off even with the screen assembly on the laptop, and then boom, you got your 4 screws here for the LCD panel, and then there's a connection back there we'll see, and then easy access to the hinge screws. So all in all, this is a really easy laptop to work on. I mean, if anything breaks, just buy a new one and you can fix it yourself. Okay, so that one looks like it's a smaller tip, so I'm going to go back to my 1.5 and remove these LCD screws. Alright, now for the part in this step, you gotta be real careful. So unless your previous screen is broken, you'll want to try to keep from smacking into those hinges when you do this. So all we need to do is peel this adhesive back for the video cable. So just don't push too hard. This panel is really thin. And then once you get the tape down, there's a little bar that swings around that connector. So we're just gonna flip it off there. So once you have that little bar down, just lift up on the LCD and it'll pop off. Alright, so it's pretty easy to tell. The hinge screws, just 4 of those, and it looks like the hinges will come off. It's also nice that the hinge is attached to a metal bracket instead of some of the plastic screw posts that they use in some of these. This laptop is actually well constructed and easily upgradable. This is one of the better fix-it-yourself type laptops that I've worked on. Alright, so for the video cable, I'm going to leave these Wi-Fi antennas on this back cover for now, but once you unstick the adhesive there, you just work them out of the channels. As you see there, they're not really stuck on with anything. I am going to get this webcam. So with webcams, you want to pry from this side, never from either end, or it's just going to bend it. So there's strong axes from the bottom or the top. And we'll finish threading that out all the way to the video cable, and then I should be able to free the video cable from the back cover. Alright, so we're left with the bare back cover, and that's pretty much it. That's how you disassemble the Dell G5 5587. I gotta say, I like this laptop. It's really easy to work on for the most common stuff, and then for your LCD it looks like a snap. You don't even have to take the screen off or do anything else besides pull that bezel off. So if you have any problems with your laptop, I would strongly suggest that you consider working on it yourself. Most of this was done with a Philips 2.5. I did switch to a 1.5 at one point. Just go slow and take pictures of cables and where they are so you can refer back to it if you're putting it back together. So that's it. If you liked the video or if it helped you, please like and subscribe. Thanks.